And I'm always been intrigued with Nimrod, even though the story is pretty brief. I read that Genesis 10, talking about the genealogy is basically where this came from. And the sons of Ham, Cush, Mizraim, Put, and Canaan, and the sons of Cush, Seba, Havilah, Saba, Rama, I'm probably pronouncing some of these wrong, Sabatash, whatever. Sons of Rama, Shelah, and Dedan. Cush begot Nimrod. He began to be a mighty one in the earth. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. Wherefore it is even said, even Nimrod, the mighty hunter before the Lord. The beginning of his kingdom was Babel, and Erech, and Akkad, Calmeh, and in the land of Shinar. Out of the land went Asher, and he also built Nineveh and a couple other cities. But when you start looking at that Nimrod and the description of Nimrod, and you compare it with this character out of Sumerian text called Sargon the Great, they're both building cities in Shinar, land of Shinar. And it doesn't say that Nimrod built the Tower of Babel, but it says that Sargon did. Sargon built the Tower of Babel. Now they're both building Babel, which became Babylon. And so a lot of the authors, and including Josephus, said that Nimrod was the one that built the Tower of Babel. And so you can bring Sargon into it, but the one that was even more interesting, you guys have heard the Epic of Gilgamesh? The Epic of Gilgamesh, a lot of people believe that Nimrod was Gilgamesh. This character that had control of the entire, at that point the civilization was pretty much around Shinar, around Babylon, current Iraq, around, most of the civilization was right in that area. And they're talking about this guy that had control over everything. He was a hunter before the Lord. They talk about Sargon and Gilgamesh, both were military leaders, so was Nimrod, and they conquered things. They made people subjective to them. And when you're talking about Sargon and Gilgamesh, they're building the Tower of Babel, first of all, to avoid the flood again, because they're mad that God made the flood. And both of them are talking about that. And they want to build the tower so that they could not only avoid the flood, but they could also, they're both angry at whoever it was that caused the flood to happen. They create the evidence, whoever caused the flood to happen, they want to have a battle with him. They want to fight with God. So they're going to build this tower to keep out of the flood, but also build it high enough where they could get to this God that's supposed to be in the heavens. This is both Epic of Gilgamesh and this guy called Sargon the Great. So if you combine those two, and the Bible talks about people, and I do believe God talks to people, and he always has. He always gotten his message across to people. But if in fact the Nimrod is the same as Sargon and the Epic of Gilgamesh, in particular the Epic of Gilgamesh is a very detailed story. Now, there's some problems with it. In the Epic, Gilgamesh actually did get to the top of the Tower of Babel, and he did have a battle with God, and at least what they think, that part of the disc that they found is kind of damaged, but they think he did kill God. Now, that was nonsense, but that's where the whole thing of God actually dying was very early. That Gilgamesh is talking about this, written sometime in 2200, 2300 BC. But it was intriguing to me that how well these guys lined up. They built the same cities. They're claimed to have built the same cities. They're both military leaders. They're mad at God for killing him. They also want to get back to, one of them was talking about getting back to the one who built the boat. Gilgamesh wanted to get after him too, Noah. So these stories are aligning with what the Bible says. Now there are little differences here and there, yeah, but exactly what you would expect to see if Noah actually wrote Genesis as a history tale. Then these parts that he's talking about, you would expect to see them, and that's exactly what we see.
I think you meant Moses writing it as a history tale.
Yeah, right. Did I say
well,
Noah?
and I think apropos to my earlier comment, you're gonna get a twisted version of history following the fall of the Tower of Babel, when God removes his hand and people go off in their own vain imaginations. The other thing that I think of is that even in the Bible, we read that people have multiple names. Maybe it's because it's a different language or whatever, but it's not unusual, certainly in the biblical history, that you would have very different names for the same person.
Yeah, exactly, because there's different pronunciations, different communities.
Different languages.
Maybe no, and I even read that Moses was actually, when he wrote about Nimrod, was actually kind of more of a classification or a description of him, as
like
opposed to a real
Pharaoh.
name.
Right,
Yeah.
a title,
Right,
not a
it's
name.
a title, right. So that's another thing that I did run across at one point.
Sure.
That, but even the secular part, one part of secular calls it Gilgamesh, another part of it calls Sargon, but they're doing the same thing at the same place, and from what I could tell, it's a little fuzzy as far as the dates go, but about the same time as well.